What do we want to tackle?
Okay. I didn't do like a lot of advanced thinking for this week.
It's been a while since we've had a solid deep dive, I think.
I guess it's been since January 30th, so it's been almost a whole month.
I do have one more suggestion. I should have asked when everyone was here for the date thing.
Okay. All right, so we have that as an agenda item, date.
And maybe to summarize kind of our findings.
All right, what else? Anything?
I know your students are doing Weaver stuff this week.
Yeah.
Right. Is it worth to do a quick 2 days of?
Well, it's like tomorrow, so I don't know.
Oh,
we're doing it in class live tomorrow.
Okay, so in that case, I
think just don't touch anything.
Okay, I was gonna say I might try to push on the radio button stuff, which I did a bit more testing on it over the weekend.
Okay.
Because that would be, I do think that would be nice to get in.
Okay.
If not, just to relieve my mental space, because if I come back to it later, I will have forgotten a lot of the work I've done.
That makes sense. Yeah. So we could talk about that either way. Weaver radio buttons.
I would love to hear what people think about what a feature might look like for assembly line for AL Kiln that would run on DocAssemble in the DocAssemble playground or
sketching out
page
UX.
or sketching out UX and possibly any leads, because I'm not sure how I would go about adding a page like that would identify a specific playground project interview file, and ideally you'd be able to trigger it from the file that you wanted to run it on, and I don't know, whatever UI it is, how to get kind of started on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, what would be documentation I could look up or examples that I could look up that will help me actually implement it? Or the
yeah. Well, when we get to that, we can probably flesh that out.
Okay. I feel like it'll vary between what we decide is the best idea. So, but for sure, I think there could definitely be something with prior art.
And then we have a couple other just lingering pull requests, don't we?
We do. User reminders.
Reminders.
I don't remember what had been blocking that most recently.
Well, we just made it a lot more flexible, and I had to sit down and add and make sure I was confident with the test to make sure it actually worked right. And I just didn't do that yet. That's really minor. I don't think we have to discuss anything there.
Okay.
Michelle, you had worked on this, and I think you said in some channel oh, this is ready to look at again, but we can talk about that too. Let's just lay out.
And I think the third PR there, I am still not for changing, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of did already discuss it, but I mean, okay with thinking about it more. PRs aren't usually the ways to make ideas about substantive stuff, but because we talked about this at one of our meetings and then decided it. Other hand, maybe we decided wrong. I don't want to say you can never.
If I remember, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not remembering anything, but I was fairly certain that I was not super certain about, or at least in the meeting, I remember trying to be I'm not sure if this is a thing we'd want to change immediately, and just being generally hesitant on it. But yeah, I don't know.
There's not a huge rush. I mean, we can see we're hoping to do more. It came from usability testing and up to code, and
Well,
we're
notably,
doing another
it came
round.
from.
So
It was definitely there was something usability wrong wise, but it wasn't like y'all thought. I didn't think it was clear from how you described the usability testing that this was the solution. Just that there was a problem with first name, last name.
no, I think you're right. I'm just saying like we could
Okay,
always test
sorry.
it with we made that change enough to code, so we're gonna do another round of testing. We can see
Yeah. Okay.
if it made a difference that is indicative of what we should do. Oh, actually, someone else is already writing in there. Okay.
I'm trying to. I'm failing.
But yeah, I mean, there's not really a rush for this. It's been the same way for a while. So I'm okay with thinking about it more. Okay, so I'm just thinking like in order. It's worth tracking what we talked about here, but just to do a little more testing. No blockers there. It makes sense probably to go through those quickly just to get status updates. We don't have to necessarily resolve it. Michelle, am I right? Am I remembering right that you had made you did have a new commit to this recently, didn't you? That we have to look at.
I
Last month it
believe
says.
so. I didn't have any, I didn't see any comments, and I figured we'd get to it when we got to it.
Okay.
Any further comments after my changes?
I think we
might
just
have
got
put something
lost.
into the issue. If I did put something, I might have put something into the issue, but I don't think so.
Do you remember anything? Should we look at it and see if we can try running
The
it and
issue's linked
see
from there. Oh, sure.
what? Yeah, because I don't see a new screenshot. I
Yeah.
think it was mostly like just around tweaking various iterations of the look and feel. Because it was it was complicated, right? We had multiple kinds of changes that were kind of getting combined, and we wanted to figure out the alignment so it would still make sense.
Yeah, let me just. See if there was anything I added. October was a while ago. I can try to pull it up.
There is a change that you did in January.
Yeah, no, I thought I was looking on the issue.
Okay. To see if there's, well, we could probably just run it if we can figure out a good way.
Yeah. So I can run. I can share. I don't remember all the tests I did, that's all. But
we could probably just see. I mean, we basically want to run it and then see what it looks like, I guess. I suppose
sure,
there's some stuff with
gonna
different
run
size
it.
pages.
I didn't see
Oh.
her running it, so.
Okay.
But that's fine.
I think if it's not, yeah, I don't know if we had like where the trade-offs were. Like, was there a way of making it not worse, basically, than the existing one? Whatever
You
worse
were on
means.
you were on a different project, by the way. Are you sure you want to put it on that project?
What?
AL email send.
Well, that's just what I named it. I don't know why I named it that. I was looking at
Okay.
your description of the
Got it.
add send email. That's
Sure.
what it's called right now.
Okay.
You're right. It's not just about sending emails. It's about making that line up with the download and view tabs
Yeah.
or buttons. I think it's done.
Thought I put in a comment somewhere about any reservations I had left about.
I think you said something somewhere, and I don't remember where.
Maybe in one of my comments.
Would this be the file to run? I guess it should be, right?
I said test documents or whatever. Test AL document. Yeah.
Is it this one, test AL table document?
I don't think so, but you can try.
Let's see how quickly we get to a download screen. We can see.
Try the other one if it loads. Anyone restarting the server other than us? Anyone reloading?
It might just be from pulling this exact package in.
Okay.
I was doing a lot of previews here. This is why this always fails. Okay, so this
Now you
all
just have
looks
to
pretty
try out
nicely lined up.
various widths.
Yeah. Try different sizes. I mean, that seems
I mean, if you look at
nice
the
and clean to
bottom,
me.
look at the bottom. Look at the bottom.
You mean down here?
Oh, that was next. Never mind. I did fix that then. Good. Never mind. That's the next button. Great. I'm excited about that.
I think this looks good. I think this like meets the brief. And
Okay. There's one thing that I did want to improve, but I don't think it's urgent, so maybe it's not worth it just to delay it. It's just a small CSS thing that I think would make the CSS a tiny bit more clear, but it's really not necessary.
anything else we should test before? There were a lot of reviews on it, obviously.
Not that I can think of if this is the behavior we want.
This was the big thing. Okay, text wrapping. Oh yeah, that bumping down to the next line. Let's just see. I mean, I don't see
You
that
said-
happening now. I guess if it's really small, that might happen, but I don't see
I
any
mean,
screens that small.
If I remember correctly, the smallest screen I generally test on is iPhone 5,
uh,
5 SE,
Where?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
which is, yeah, 320.
Yeah, that looks
you
good.
might want to
forgot.
make it bigger and watch when it switches and see if you like that. There's not like a ton of control I have over that, but you know, got to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I can see a line with the head. Okay, so it switches at around 578, which is the size DocAssembly uses, right? That's Bootstrap, medium
Yeah,
size.
that's the size Bootstrap uses.
That seems like the right place to switch to me, because that will be the least confusing place for developers who are using
Okay.
Bootstrap anywhere else.
Okay.
Intentionally, and not just as part of DocAssembly defaults. This looks good to me. It looks great, and it took a while. And it was like really all these CSS things seem to me they
Yeah.
say like, oh, maybe it will be easy, but I'm always wrong. But yeah, thanks for working
No.
so hard and getting them done.
Sure.
All right, I'm ready to merge this.
Yay. Hmm.
All right, and I should finish this up so that we're not waiting on me on that. Yeah. And this one, I don't know. I guess what we can do is see. There's no real reason to leave it open as a pull request if we're not going to do it. Maybe I'll leave it open for now anyway, so we don't forget it.
Yeah.
Weaver, that's a separate agenda item. We're going to go a little bit more in depth than I think, right? Any other? I can easily see which issues I'm assigned to or what pull request I'm assigned to. But otherwise, I don't remember. I'm not assigned to it.
There's a pull request on the documentation site that I think I just left open so I could do one more quick like edit pass. There's this one.
You just made a change to it recently, right? I don't think I understood the possible fix.
It was,
I wanted to look at it a little closer to make sure I understood.
yeah, I think it was the fact that if you um, if you passed it, it was like something that didn't quite like isn't a common thing that had happened, but I think it was if you passed in um, if you passed in size but not color or color CS, it would still try to use the color.
Got it.
I was a bit
Okay.
confused about the code in here in general, but I don't think that
Yeah,
needs to be
it has slowly been a little accumulated, a little cruft. And I only did this just because I was like, oh, can add types to this, and I think it gave me a quick like, oh, like this is not set and will not turn out right or whatever. Which is the point
By
of
the way-
types, so that's good. But
That is good. Okay, that makes sense.
what was the by the way?
The MyPy, like I was running into this recently where I set up a type, which is correct, and then I have logic, which is correct, which makes sure there's like, it was an optional value. And MyPy still like throws an error and says the type isn't guaranteed, essentially, even though I know it had control. I'm like, I'm not sure how to best do that. Maybe I have to set it in ignore. Anyway, I don't have the question clear enough right now to really ask it now, but
That's fair. I mean, in general, ignoring things that
figure out.
you know are right is fine. So
Maybe that is the fix. But it felt like there should be a way for me to say like, oh, when I do this get, it was pulling something from config, I should be able to guarantee, say that what type it's going to be. If it's, no, maybe that's not the right thing to say. Anyway, I'll think about it more and see if I have the question. Maybe you know the answer to it.
yeah, that'd be fair.
And okay, you said on the documentation.
Yeah, which I think was mostly just I think what it was. I'm blanking on what it was. Oh, it was toolbox cleanup. Of just I've generally, which like maybe this is a good thing to bring up at the deep dive, to make sure that I'm doing, because I think I've mentioned this a few times and I got a few like okays, but I want to make sure to clarify that like I'm attempting to move as much documentation that's about like this specific function and this specific function only. I'm trying to move it over to the like code API. So there's the code API, like there's a new tab on the top that I added. And so all of the reference stuff is going to be there. And so if you want to know something more about like a specific function and like its parameters and everything, you'd go to the code API and you search. Like it will still show up in the search. But mostly all of everything under code API comes from the doc strings and like from the actual like documentation of the type itself. And just trying to keep like whenever we were talking about a specific function and not like a more general guide or like how to use all of these things in concert, trying to keep that information in code, because I've noticed a lot of times it gets out of date pretty quickly because we'll be adding parameters that won't be like necessarily mentioned, or we're just like subtly changing things. And I feel like the closer it is to the code, the more likely it is to get updated. Does that feel right to y'all? Does that make sense?
So it's what we were kind of like
change.
originally thinking, and then we kind of were having trouble doing that. Like I was definitely struggling with getting this to look right, and I know we want to get rid of this.
Yeah.
It makes, so I guess, but I don't want to, can we get this kind of stuff in there that we have? Or is this not the kind of thing that you're thinking of moving over?
So it's weird because some of the stuff is like the one place I don't think it works super well is when we're documenting like how to use this type in an interview. And so some of the more complicated stuff like the like AL address, where like, oh, this is how you use it in the interview with like the address fields and this is how you would override a particular like label on that address field, where you're going back and forth between YAML and like Python or whatever. That I think makes sense to have it more as a guide. But if it's just like I essentially was going through the toolbox documentation, and a lot of it was just like, here's a function in the toolbox. This is how you call it, and these are all of the parameters. And that felt like it could just stay next to the code. I do agree that I'm not a huge fan of the PyDoc like output by default, and we could change that, but like I think it means forking PyDoc or like adding a custom class. I don't think they had. They might have had plugins.
Class might not be that bad, but
yeah, they may have had plugins, but it was mostly like I wasn't sure where to put it.
Yeah,
I don't want to have. I don't think it's worth the overhead of another repo if we just added one like Python class to it. It might also be like as doable as just we take the output from it and we like format it really quick, or like do some extra stuff like, oh, if there's an H4 that's followed by a code block, get rid of that code block, because I know we didn't really like how this was displayed, I think. So we could do some simple things like that, maybe, but it was mostly I like was trying to avoid adding extra maintenance to like documentation supporting code as much as I could, and it was just trying to get as much information on the side as I could. So yeah, maybe long term it would make sense to move some of these elsewhere, or not elsewhere, to change how this is formatted and make it a bit clearer, because I too sort of don't like the default. But as long as we're generally okay with
keeping the documentation close to the code makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to avoid like if we have a really detailed guide that maybe could be in either place. Like I don't want to go through the extra overhead of redoing it and then maybe not working as well. But if there's things like those, I think the toolbox is a really good example of one where like we're like, well, we need to document this and we aren't using the auto-generated, so let's make a new one, but it's not going to be very detailed. Yeah. That seems to make sense to move over.
Yeah, like I think I left
thing, people can find it.
I think I left the collapsible stuff here because that's the thing that's going back and forth and is more of a in-depth guide. But this is the live site, so this doesn't have the changes I've made yet. But it was stuff like format a telephone. It's the only example code is like include the module in your interview and shorten the URL. And so I just sort of, okay, this is really just really closely associated.
Okay.
And like I think Caroline specifically wanted like an output checkbox, some documentation on how to use it in the docx, and that I left like in the toolbox guide because we need some extra pictures that you just can't really put in docstring code. So
is it going to be easy to like link back and forth, or I guess mostly to link from the guide to the code so you're not repeating yourself if you cover both?
Yeah, I think it should be, because the code, the links on the site will stay like stable as long as the code's in the same place. You might have to like update the site first to make it easier while you're writing stuff, but it is doable. It also would be doable to link to guides from the docstring, but in both cases you just sort of have like a chicken and the egg problem of like, you just need to write one without the links and then add the other one and then do the double links back.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think that makes sense that happens. That's not really a big problem to me if there's a few minutes when the documentation isn't accurate.
Yeah.
So, okay. Maybe that's its own item here. I don't think we did a lot of deep linking, but we should, I don't know what to do about that if we did, to a particular function when we were giving people documentation, if there's any references anywhere else to those old links. I guess there's a search function. They're not going to be like, we could probably just wait till those happen. I'm not too worried about it, but it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not
Okay,
saying we need
that's a
some
good
giant
point.
project to fix those links, because
Yeah,
we do have to
the
keep in
page-
mind, like, for how comprehensive we make the docs, like, we're talking about like 5 to 10 people who read them, who meet with us every week and always ask. So we're their super search engine, for the
pretty
most
much.
part.
Okay,
Yeah. So
that's a good
actually,
point.
it's another point is I want to be careful.
Yeah, it shouldn't break pages at all. It would break anchor links. If
Right.
And so if we
Oh, good point. If there's still a place, is there a way to have, like, at the bottom of these guides,
I do
a
think
link to the code? Do we do that?
I think I put it at the top of the guide. I think at the top of the
Top is
guide,
better,
I was
guess.
like, I was like, here you can, if you want to look at like detailed information about all of the parameters, check out this page. And like I linked directly to I think the MISC page, which is the general one.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I wonder if the MISC one should, no, it shouldn't import the other ones. That's the whole point of keeping it separate.
Yeah,
But should we list all of the functions, maybe?
I was trying to, we might
all
just
the
link
Pi
directly
modules,
to
I guess.
each. We could link each to each Pi module. That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that was another like slight issue with PyDocs of like, oh, it would be nice if there was just a parent page that existed and I could click each one, but I couldn't link to it because that page doesn't exist. And I like tried making it, but it just creates a underscore init page, which is not very useful. So
no one will know to look in there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So not the most intuitive name. Okay. Yeah, no, I like that direction. I know for me, I was like, I'm just gonna not fight this anymore because it's taking too much time. Hopefully it's not getting to that point for you where it becomes a huge time sink, because just balancing it with everything else.
No, yeah, I've been doing a bit more than I sort of anticipated, but I do think that's sort of how documentation goes, of like, get it up to a certain point and then it can stay pretty stable, and hopefully that is okay. I don't know. Michelle, do you have any thoughts about documentation stuff?
I agree with what y'all have been saying. I think the line between when to document, I wish you could document maybe in a README in the code or something, that it would be not in a README, because you can't, something you could edit from DocAssemble where you could put all the details instead of the documentation having to be a separate place, because that's frustrating. That you could do like a hyperlink inside the description, inside the code description, that would link to another document in the same repository. But because it's just hard to bounce back and forth between the different documents. So yeah, and the line between when you need to do it just in the function description and in the actual documentation is kind of fuzzy, but I think we have some clear cases. So
it does feel like the ones that we're tackling right now are relatively clear. Sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sure. As long as it's clear in the Suffolk documentation when they should, like, where they should go for what information, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, and I didn't see that part. It just went by a bit too fast. That it doesn't have like here's all the documentation about income and then nothing about, for Toolbox you need to go to the API part of the documentation, right?
There's still a AL Toolbox page, like in the guides section. That is sort of the equivalent, and it's just in that section we at the very top we say like, here are like some useful things you might find. Not everything is described here. If you want to know everything, go to this reference page that lists every single function and all of its detailed inputs and stuff.
Okay. And then it would also be good for me to know how to document the date functionality, because I don't think there's a PyDoc.
Is that a Toolbox one too?
It's a Toolbox one.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a Toolbox and it's a custom date, or it's a custom data type.
Yeah.
I think guides is still a good general start for it, and so
Okay.
like I think that one's a bit too complicated to try to do in a doc string somewhere. So
Yeah.
I can help you out. I think just I think just do it in
I
on
mean,
the standard page is a good idea.
Okay.
For now.
referencing AL toolbox makes sense to me too, but I wonder, we do call this functions and components, I guess, don't we? So I guess it could just be here, and it is here now. So I guess that's probably the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the answer. Keep it here. I'm wondering if we should like have a custom data types page. If we're trying to focus this less on here's the module, but more the function, like the guide, it seems more function oriented to me, like more what's my goal, rather than all the documentation for a particular module file. I wonder if
Mm.
AL toolbox is actionable enough, goal oriented enough. Maybe it should just be like custom data types, custom functions.
I think that's a good long term goal. I think for now it's probably good, and like when we add it, we can just quickly add stuff, and if we ever want to break it out into a separate page, that's like here's how to add validation to your bet, or here's how to make a better date, like a better date entry than just like the default date entry, and describe all of the detailed things there. We could split it out later, but I agree with like that's a better thing, but it's definitely like a slightly lower hanging thing. And I think with the search tool and like having things in multiple places as much as we can, we'll cover our bases for now. So
I think that's fair. Yeah, definitely not urgent. All right. Any other? Okay, so I think that's all good. And I think
that
it says that
covers
you
it.
wanted to merge it when you're ready, Bryce. So I'll let you
yes,
do that.
Right, that first, yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah. Got some good ideas too, to some quick fixes that I can add to. So
Okay. Any other like code review, like organization stuff that we just have to make sure moves along, and this meeting's a good place to do it in?
the nothing else that's not already listed that I can think of.
Terms
Actually,
of use.
Oh, did those not go in? I'm missing that. Yeah,
I was thinking I had an idea of.
That's between Suffolk. That's between us and like the Suffolk Legal Counsel, though, right?
Yeah,
So,
it is more for us. Just I think I feel like we're just okay with accepting their changes as long as we get to put them at the end rather than where they wanted to put them, like in their own like gobbledygook section of the terms of use, basically.
Okay.
That's where I kind of am. We just have to see what David thinks about that, I guess, today.
I think there was something I was reading about accessibility, about having labels be links and how that's not. But I think now that we have the terms of use there, that's changed anyway.
Yeah, I think
right.
the main
that was the
main best part about
it.
this is that it's just on the page. People can scroll through, and it's a lot shorter.
And if we wanted it on the page, we have to make it shorter. That was one of the reasons why we're like, let's look at this again. And it needs to be short enough people can actually read it if they will, and it's on the same page. And we don't want a separate page because then people will get lost.
Yeah.
I did think that like maybe another thing we should be doing is not showing that screen if the person has an account and indicates they don't want to see it every time, which maybe means moving it to its own page, but different question. That's a bigger future discussion, I guess.
I like the idea. I have a similar thing in the EFSB stuff. I've added where if you've logged in one interview and any other interview you do, it works, and it's just using the DA store, so it actually is pretty nice. And that could be a thing we could try integrated into the first screens probably.
Okay.
Great. Okay. All right. Anyone think of anything else?
Um,
Or
Any-
for this PR?
We haven't been doing a lot of new issue creation. Been pretty quiet on core development stuff, actually. So I'm not thinking
Yeah,
there's anything here, probably. Other than the Weaver pull request for radio buttons. Anyone have a suggestion for the order, the best order to tackle these in?
radio buttons should be quick. There's one
Okay.
open question that is pretty done. But I do think the 3-part date stuff is like the most actionable for Michelle.
Right.
Well, whatever. I was just saying 3 can be last. I don't think it's a super, like, that's not super immediate.
That's fair.
Okay.
I'm excited about having that conversation, but I agree.
Yes, me too.
Well, okay. Since everyone's fighting to not go first, we'll just do the Weaver one first.
All right.
I know the most about it. I guess actually that's not really true. I guess I know equal amount for both of them.
Yeah.
All right. So you said there was a question here. You want to give like a quick description of it?
So I think it was not necessarily in this one, but it's mostly just like that this exists. Radio buttons, like DocAssemble actually finds radio buttons and says they're buttons and doesn't just group them. And it used to like not actually find each one, and it would group them all into the same variable when they're like should be 3 separate ones. And so we get that back now, right? I admit the PR. Quinn pointed out that the unit test failed, which I think I missed, but I fixed that like yesterday. And
Or just the kill?
Yes, kill and failed because I pushed two commits at once. But I think the open question was that we like, well, now like if you use Acrobat and you add a radio button, you can give it its own name, and it will take whatever the choices people make and make them to default choices. I don't think we're doing anything smart about trying to give them better names, but it'll at least sort of by default suggest you use a radio button in your interview. But I think it was like in a different issue open. Quentin, you had mentioned we could get it upstream. It was like a long time ago. It was like we could get it upstream, but then we'd have to like actually get it upstream and then also start to move away from Gavel and the Documates tool, because Documates tool doesn't support radio buttons.
Is there anything like radio buttons to group checkboxes? Is that a Acrobat concept?
It's a good question. In general, PDFs, well, I'm not sure. I don't think so, because I think there can be more than one checkbox. And I think in general, PDFs they let you group different things, but it's like only if you're selecting a single value. Like essentially at the end of the day, it's still only if there's a field with a single value in it, then you can group things like that. But checkboxes are like by default, more than one can be checked. And so I think that's a thing we'd have to add just in our like syntax or our suggestions on how people label fields to get those to group.
Yeah, that was
I'm trying
the
to find
original.
the question that you had asked, but I guess it's probably linked from the issue rather than from the pull request, which would make sense. Let's see.
I have lost where it was.
Okay.
I had a lot of these tabs open on my
Still waiting to actually have it. I did see your message about it. No, I don't. This would probably. Okay. Well, weird that I didn't see it. Okay, maybe because I'd already referenced it. It counted that as the first link.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. I think we have to think, like, I'm not sure how many of these we'll find in the wild unless we say this is the way we want to start doing it. which I think is your point. Like, do we want to tell people a new workflow to use to do this? Which is, I think, fair. That maybe we do. We'll also be able to talk with Document, see if they'll add some features for it. But I don't know how complicated it is. I'm not sure what they're building on.
Yes. Yeah.
Then there's checkboxes. Where do we care to have checkboxes? Yeah, we want them grouped because it's one question in DocAssemble usually. And it's better if people can do things like say they've checked all of them or none of them or some subset. So that's still useful in DocAssemble to have them grouped. But maybe radio buttons were always their own thing, because radio buttons are really like a special case of a drop-down menu or a fill in the blank field, right? It's like there's only one value, we're going to show it a special way on the form, but it's not ever relevant to have.
Yeah, I think it's a separate thing, but they show up a bit more than like drop downs do, because I think they show up more on paper forms. And so to get the same idea on a paper form, you would use a radio button, and those just show up a bit more.
I wonder if there are ways. I don't think we'll ever really be able to get Form Fixer to do radio buttons, will we? To know that that's a radio button and group the fields together accurately.
I think my best, there's a way, like there could be some like computer vision stuff to do to check if it's a circle. I think I had some things that it's like courts don't always stick with circles are radio buttons, squares are checkboxes. And so I don't think we'd be able to say this is or like semantically a radio button or semantically a checkbox, but we could get like this is a circle check or this is not a circle check or something.
That makes me think, given, like, I don't know how confident we would be with that heuristic. We'd want us to let people like fix it without having to delete the field and re-add it, right? So maybe we'd still want to let people manually label items and saying these are meant to be radio buttons and these are meant to be checkboxes. Although I don't know that it's important that they be separate concepts. So we could just say, this is our syntax for manually saying these are checkboxes that are grouped. And then you can treat them like a radio button in your interview. That probably is okay. Right? Like there doesn't have to be a distinction in the labeling format for those two cases.
No. Yeah, I think all we need to say is this is grouped. Like, yeah.
Okay. Step dive, that would be something different. All right.
That would be.
Anything else you want to add there? And you're right that the table column is really just like, we should have a syntax that kind of makes sense together for both of those tasks. It's not really the same thing, but we'll want whatever syntax we come up with to make sense in both scenarios.
Okay.
That's pretty much the only thing. And I do think we don't have to make it be a valid variable name. So like using something that people would never use for other circumstances, like a new symbol makes sense. And plus was kind of what made sense to me. This is not something we have to act on quickly. You're wondering, is the radio button stuff ready to merge? I think it is. I think it'll be nice for people who have those in the wild. Okay. I think before we tell people use a new workflow, we might want to get checkboxes working too.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And that kind of means people may not use the radio buttons right away.
Which is fine. Yeah.
Okay. Because checkboxes don't require it, right? Like there's no way to use the new workflow for checkboxes.
No, we're only detecting if like you bring in a PDF that already is using a radio button, and most of it's like you should be able to go through the Weaver steps, and we'll just fill in everything for you correctly, and it will work. And so it shouldn't be a thing that people really need to think about if they come across a PDF with a radio button. And it's not. And so yeah, I think if it's not documented anywhere, people might end up using it, but they won't know they're using it, and that's the best new feature.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I think that's good. So we're probably going to keep this open, but this is really nice that we can work with more in the wild PDFs.
Cool.
And I think that the PR is ready to merge.
Okay, that's all. That's all. The discussion for that feature then. And I do still think we're waiting for a DocAssemble launch or a DocAssemble release with that change. So I'll probably just wait for it to be released before testing a bit more. But yeah.
Tables we should be able to actually recognize. I feel like pretty confident we could come up with a way to identify tables correctly with the form fixer.
Yeah, no, I think I agree there too.
Ultimately, it's
Well,
just coming up with the names, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we're actually doing to find fields, we're like already finding like horizontal and vertical bars, and so it's just a matter of using them more.
Yeah.
So yes, technically, I agree it's possible, and it might actually. It's mostly it should be pretty easy to integrate. It's just a matter of whether it's the right thing to do, and whether it catches all of them. But that's like smaller tweaks later on. So
that is like if there's this AWS Textract. I don't know, like that's really good at doing tables, and maybe there's some research papers that they relied on. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't think the answer is to use a paid for API, but maybe it is.
I think.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
It's more just when we release it into the wild, do we want to let people do it without having to pay per use?
Yes. Yeah.
And if we're trying to do 28,000 PDFs, do we want to pay per use?
No, we don't.
I mean, it's not very expensive API. It might be like 50 cents a page. That adds up to a lot for if you're processing in bulk. Okay. I'll let you merge that. I guess I'll just.
Yeah, finish.
All right. Three-part date field. It sounded like there's something you didn't get a chance to say, Michelle, that you could have brought up at the management meeting.
I didn't think of it at the time. One thing is I could, instead of having one error message, have a list of error messages. So that's pretty easy. Though I'm not sure how it would play with DocAssemble's automatic required thing, but since I'm overwriting it anyway, it won't matter, I guess. Sorry, go ahead, Bryce.
I was going to say my take on multiple things is that if it's interactive and is like doing things, it is doing things whenever like people change and enter and exit the fields, right? And it's not on submit. So
not on submit, no.
Yeah, as long as it's not on submit, I think that only showing one at a time is fine. Since it's like such a quick, oh, this one, change it. Also, oh, this one too, change it. I think the chance that there's more than one serious thing that someone would actually have to think about. Like, I feel like people like they might mistype and say, "Oh, I typed February 31st. I meant to click January." Cool, that's like a really quick one, and then after that, they'll be, "Oh, it needs to be this like other date or like an earlier date or something," and I think that's fine too. But mostly, trying to show more than one would get confusing if like fixing one issue fixes both of them at the same time.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I think compilers sometimes show a lot of issues at the same time, but that's only because it takes like 30 seconds to compile something. Also, I don't know why that's my like go-to example, but I think it is for
I
showing
was
multiple
gonna-
examples or multiple errors.
So conclusion, leave at one message. I'd love to be able to write down like your reasoning, but I think like we don't have a lot of time for that.
I can add my reasoning to this
Okay.
agenda doc.
Okay, and maybe I'll put that in the issue. So naming, I would love people take a look at the names of the
Right.
custom YAML keys.
You use them like
attributes.
AL such and such, right?
Yeah, we can't have dashes.
Oh,
That I
and no
know.
underscores?
I can try underscores. I haven't tried underscores yet.
And also,
probably
Like dashes
should-
broke things.
Should probably
Could you
try underscores.
could you use
Sorry.
max or min directly without the AL?
No.
Okay. I wanted to make sure.
You know what? I can try. Hang on. Try adding max to equal. That's something I didn't try. So that's
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's enough if it doesn't work, then like don't worry about it. But if it
Underscores.
does,
that would be great. Yeah.
it would be great. Yeah. So
This is meant to be underscores, right? Not like dashes. Okay.
Don't try dashes.
Yeah.
Dashes don't work.
Okay. I wonder if the reason why dashes don't work, by the way, is just because
They're not valid variables.
they're not escaped.
Yeah.
You might have to just make them quoted or put them in, or it might be a YAML parsing issue.
well, no, they have to be.
No.
You were saying they have to be Python variables, right, Michelle?
I think they have to be Python variable. You know what? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know which internals. It wasn't a docassemble bug. I think it was a jQuery validation plugin bug.
Oh,
Oh.
so JavaScript variable names.
JavaScript.
Maybe it was trying to do some unsafe code execution. All right.
Yes. And the last thing, so yeah, like I think we can change crossing boundaries, whatever, which is a confusing name, to something like too many days.
You want to show it? I don't think I'll stop my share so you can show us what you mean.
Oh, sure.
I'm not sure
Let me
this place to see it.
pull that up. That's not the last thing. That's part of the same thing. There's one more thing after. I was wrong. So this thing is hiding. There's the playground. So crossing boundaries, crossing bounds is like when we have like the 30th of February, where the day, I just realized after building it that it really only matters if the day is wrong. Because that's where it ends up being evaluated anyway. So we could say too many days, right? Or something. Or some other name. I just don't think crossing bounds is very clear.
I agree with you. I don't think I know what it means even now.
It's just like February 31st doesn't exist, right? Like it's that particular error message.
Yeah.
Or like
We'll
there's
just
no
call
January 32nd.
Can we just try it like the date, not a valid date? Would that make more sense?
But tons of these are not a valid date.
Not a valid month, day for a month.
So
Invalid,
you're saying
invalid day.
valid day for a month?
Well, just invalid day is probably good because it's not the day, it's just the day. Yeah.
Okay, I like invalid day.
Is the AL prefix doing anything really there, given these are custom?
Um,
I guess maybe for min and max, if
no.
min and max don't work.
Like,
And
yeah,
then if those
min
don't
and
work,
max
maybe we
don't
want to
work.
keep those.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a risk where people are using something like, well, default works.
Default message, max message, crossing bounds, 4-digit year message. I mean, we could take them out. I like prefixing our stuff because I've found when we don't prefix our stuff, later we regret it. Like that's what I've generally found as a general rule. So
I'm not
I
sure that
hesitate to.
that rule applies because this is already namespaced under AL 3 parts test validation, and
I
our
mean, but it's
parameters.
our thing is just called AL. It's just called 3 parts date. Like the actual thing does not have a prefix.
Oh yeah, I forgot we hadn't done that yet. That's fair. I will say I think that's the thing that needs to be namespaced. I don't think
Okay.
the variables need to be namespaced underneath that.
Okay.
It's a good rule of thumb, but in this case, we are already nested. So
Okay. So let me
Yeah,
add
I'm
that.
thinking like, where else do we if so, like one thing I'm realizing is if people use this custom validation, is the custom validation always required? Or is it just optional?
Custom validation. What are you referring to specifically?
So there are some places where we have code that parses YAML files to do things with them, like the review screen generator.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to put in a list of all of the valid modifiers. And well, things like AL max and required would be in that list. So I guess if we prefixed ours, it would make it easier for us to say, okay, everything's prefixed, so we know anything that starts with this prefix is not the variable label. It's the, because of DocAssemble's early choice to reverse the direction of the label and the variable name that corresponds to the label. When we parse a YAML file, we need a rule for what things are valid and might not be the label. We have to have a list of strings, basically, that we say, these are something we can ignore. They're not the label for this field.
Okay. So
the only reason I can think of to maybe prefix stuff. But if you can make that min and max, then that'll be fine. And then if these are not commonly used, then I'm okay with that too, because that just means people who have really custom stuff don't get the auto review screen generator working for them in every case. That's okay. But it would be nice if people could just use the stock version of this. Does that make sense? So do people always need some of these fields that start with the AL prefix?
Let me think.
Right now.
If they want translation right now, that's the only way to get it.
Okay. I mean, obviously we can add these to those lists. And I think it's just the review screen generator. Maybe there's another one, maybe our feature that scans the file and gets the readability also needs to be updated with the new list of our custom modifiers. I don't know if modifier is the right word, but that's probably
prefixes.
And I don't like that name, but yeah.
Okay. You never have. I've never found out why. But
it's not like a general thing. I just don't think it's very descriptive for what these things are.
Okay. You mean this? Maybe you meant the whole thing.
I meant the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Prefix AL is a prefix. Yes, that's right. But if we're talking about the whole thing here, that's how I thought you were saying that would be the prefix.
No.
No.
So are we keeping AL or are we losing it? I guess.
Can you find out if min and max work?
Sure, but the rest of them.
My thing is if min and max work, get rid of the rest of them, and we should be able to find a way to work around that in our other tools. I think it's worth finding a way to work around that because it makes it much more readable and writable for everyone else. And if we can't use min or max, then I would just keep them on to keep them consistent.
But I thought Matt wanted to be able to do custom messages.
So I'm okay with us especially handling all of these. I'm thinking of like for the future, when we have more things to update and maintain, are we going to regret having a long list of things that we can't just automatically skip and having to hard code a long list of names for those? I'm going to call them modifiers. They modify the field in some way.
So we don't want anything other than min and max? We don't want
If
any
we
custom messages?
if we get min and max in there, I know people will use those all the time, which means we definitely need to handle that kind of thing. If we sorry, I was saying if we can't use min and max directly, let's come up with a rule that lets us make it easy to handle these custom modifiers. If we can get min and max, and we have default already, so maybe we can.
We have default already?
Default is still working here.
That default, yes, not a message. That,
Right.
Yes.
So
no, but either way, do we want custom messages or no custom messages? That's my question.
We want custom messages,
yeah,
right?
keep the custom messages. I mean, you said it has to be there for translation. I think we definitely want to make sure all of our
Oh, I
widgets
thought
that we
that's what we
produce
were
are
talking
translatable.
about. Okay.
No, I'm just talking about the prefix with AL or not.
Oh,
It
Yeah.
sounds like our
But
general
AL
preference is to not have it unless we have a really useful thing it does with the prefix. The only thing I can think of as being useful is simplifying and reducing the amount of updates we need to do over time to things like the review screen generator and maybe our linter that checks readability of a whole YAML file. I thought of some other things that are like that we might end up wanting to do. So I think it's kind of nice. Maybe we still need to come up with a way to centralize that list of all of our custom modifiers somewhere. So it's one place to update it.
I think DocAssemble has a way to handle these things, right? Because it's not blowing up.
You're right, but it might just always find the first thing. That could be a different, better way to do it.
I think
There's not technically an order.
It will err if it's no, yeah, it's not an order. I think it errs if it doesn't if it finds more than one. That's been my experience, and so I think it's taking the definition of the custom data type.
It's using the definition of.
So you're saying we should look
sure.
at the installed modules on the server?
I think DocAssemble has a way to like know what parameter or like what attributes the custom data type is taking from the field.
Yes.
And if DocAssemble does, we will have a way to do it.
But it might rely on that being installed on the server, which is probably okay, I guess.
I'd go to say if it's be necessary if it's installed on the server, because then if it's not installed on the server, then your interview will break because you have a bad data type.
Well, someone doesn't need to use our server to run the review screen generator installed on our server or our linter, right? But I guess it's not better than hard coding the list of things. Is still the same problem that we would have had there.
Yeah,
so,
I think it's if there's a way we can get it from DocAssemble to be like, hey, what are the custom data types on this server and what attributes do they use? Then we should do that, and then we don't have to touch it ever again, because that's the only sort of finickiness that's happening is us just handling all of these custom data types and their extra parameters.
Right, you're right. It really is only relevant to custom data types, or when DocAssemble changes its list of allowed modifiers. I think currently there's a lot of these are hard coded when DocAssemble's parsing the YAML. And that's what it gives you that error message.
I've seen that code before, and I agree. I think it's hard. Some of it's hard coded.
I mean, whenever you have when you have a parameter in a field that is not accounted for, like foo : whatever, then you get an error. If you add if you add that parameter to your custom data type, you don't get that error. That's and I don't think that can be hard coded in, right?
No, obviously it's not, because it's your custom data type. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that angle, because I was thinking, oh, DocAssemble does it by hard coding, so we have to maintain a list. And I was starting to think, well, we don't always have control over who wants to use it. But if it's unlikely to be a scenario where we would care. If they're using the version installed in our server, they shouldn't expect custom data types to work that are only on their own server. And we couldn't help them by hard coding it with our own list of custom data types, because there would be things that aren't installed, by definition, there'd be things that aren't installed on our server either, if they're things that aren't hard coded in the list. Okay. Do you have a clear direction? I know we ended up touching a lot of different questions, and
So we decided that we don't need the AL prefix as long as min and max work. But if min and max don't work, we do want the AL prefix for everything.
And we want to use underscores instead of squish words if we can. Or camel case, maybe. It's really hard to read when it's all like that.
It is really hard to read.
I know we don't use camel case anywhere else, so hopefully underscores work.
Yeah. Away, no, otherwise keep it.
Or Pascal case, whatever we want it to be.
Pascal case, you think so? That's for classes.
It doesn't. Yeah,
Isn't it? Oh no.
It is for classes. You're right, absolutely right. I hope we can use underscores. That's all.
Okay. Yes. Should we have a minimum default value for birth date?
And that's here. It's
We
like
have
the
a minimum. We have a
year
default maximum value.
1011, 111. Okay.
I mean, no, it's not. That's the custom min value.
In the example here, that's what you mean by the minimum. Yeah, I'm just making sure I understand the minimum part, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, maximum age basically for somebody.
Yeah.
I believe Matt has said his interviews he just uses 120, which is probably fine. I have no idea what, given it's extremely generic for us. Like, I don't know if it might be like, oh, what's like you're trying to handle the age of
when was your great grandmother born?
Yes, like it's someone who could have passed a long time ago. I'm a bit hesitant to add a default. If we wanted to make it something ridiculous, like 500 or 600 years ago, that's probably fine.
Password genealogy records would work basically, right?
But what if in the future archeologists want to use this?
Then
So they could just add a custom minimum.
It's true.
It's about the default.
Then I sure hope they're not on DocuSimple in
Yeah.
hundreds of years.
I hope that. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to say that could be the solution for people who want something over common current birth dates too. Because if we're thinking this is like a batteries included kind of toolbox, should someone have to specify the oldest someone can be if it's to help people enter the right information in the right place? But people aren't likely to put in a really old year. Anything other than the current year, they're unlikely to accidentally enter in a field that is the birth date field.
Enter a 1 at the beginning instead of a 2, but that's all I can think of.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I think it catches
or 1s
egregious.
instead of 2s.
Yeah, I think it catches egregious errors.
We are requiring 4-digit years already. That's built hard coded into the class, right?
Yeah.
That's not it. So, which I think is reasonable.
That's code. That's in the JavaScript.
Yeah.
Okay. It's part of the custom data type means you have to use a 4-digit year already. So I guess we should be able to say a minimum age by default and make it be birth dates are for people who are currently alive, or your grandparent maybe at best.
So what should that be?
300 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, I'd make it 200, but
Okay.
I think that
Pick one. Tell me the answer.
I mean, the thing is, as I say that, it's like, well, what's the minimum we want it to be that would count for use cases we haven't that are like maybe someone will do that, and it's like at least a 5% chance. It makes me feel like people are going to just have to override this. So maybe batteries included are, we tell people you should set a minimum if you know this is going to be used for people who are currently alive versus grandparents versus so on.
Okay, so we don't put a default?
Maybe no default's the way to go.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
include.
I mean, we do have a default, which is they can't be more than 1,020 years old. But that feels okay. 1,023 years old. No, I guess it's 2,000. What am I talking about? No. After that, it would be 999. That was what it was. Okay.
Okay.
I can math sometimes.
I can't, so I'm just going to trust you. Okay, so those were my questions.
I mean, can they put in a 0 as a leading 0? Just curious.
I don't think so. I think I took care of that.
It's a
Because I'm a
numeric input.
brilliant person, but I'm just going to check real quick. I put cannot start
cannot
with
start with
0
0.
here.
Okay.
Should I include that in the message, or should that not? Is that too confusing?
No, it's fine.
You could also say it too. Yeah, I think 4 digits long would still. Yeah, I think you're fine
Be
with what you've
sufficient,
done here.
so
I think you're good.
This is good? Okay, so
Because I can see people. I mean, if we make it 4 digits and it can't start with 0, like we're not going to get it's going to be 100 years before we have the O such and such problem again.
okay. But do I need to include the cannot start with 0, or should we just do 4 digits long and people will figure out what they did?
I mean, I think it's good to have the whole thing. It's not too confusing. The most important part's at the beginning. I think it's fine. I was going to say, like, you could tell people your year has to be after the year 999, but that doesn't feel like it's helpful information for someone who just accidentally left off a digit, right? I think the 4-digit part is the most important message to convey to people. And cannot starting with 0 is worth leaving in because that's the specific error someone ran into here. They might have accidentally, maybe their cursor jumped and they put the 0 at the beginning, but they meant it at the end. They were trying to write the year 2000 or 2020 or whatever, any year ending with 0. So I like that phrasing.
I can try and do a separate check for 0. I know what Caroline would say. She would say don't include both of them because it's confusing. But
I think it's clear the most important part's the beginning, which is the part people read and they don't read the rest.
Okay.
When I tested it yesterday, I was getting like a double error message somehow. Like there was one on the individual. Did you fix that?
There were lots of double error problems. And there were also problems where if you went into a different field and got an invalid thing, like the other message would go away. The message on the other one would go away. Like there were a lot of issues. I mean, yeah, I believe so. You can definitely, kick its tires and try and replicate whatever.
I wasn't sure if it was like particular to one device. I think I probably opened it on my phone when I was out and about. If you already know about it, I'm going to assume you fixed it.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense to me as an error that would be on different devices.
Didn't really to me either. Because the whole point of jQuery is, I guess, to smooth over those issues. So, okay. I think we only have 4 minutes, so we should probably jump to the kiln stuff, which obviously we're not going to get very far in, but maybe one place to start is thinking. You said docs. Do you want to tell us, like, do you have an idea for where you'd want people to be able to use this? Because I guess the question is, are you thinking hacking Docassemble internals? Are you thinking adding a custom Flask endpoint?
Well, like we did when we added to the snippets, right? Or like we did when you added the dashboard.
Those are
thinking
really
stuff
different
like
things,
that.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're both different than each other. I'm just saying, like, I don't want to fork Docassemble, but it is something to do with providing another interface on the page.
Another option could be writing an extension.
How?
Browser extension.
Browser extension? I don't think so, because it needs to run a terminal in Docassemble.
If a browser extension with like an extra Flask endpoint on Docassemble could work, but that feels like a lot of effort. My thoughts on
security risk. surely it's a security risk. I mean, it can't log into DocAssemble and
Not if you give
mess
the
with the
well, if you give the
internals.
extension the API key. It wouldn't just let anyone do it. But
Yeah, just having another API key that can, I don't
no,
know.
yeah, it's definitely a thing to consider.
I was thinking like a browser extension to do the custom UI changes, like adding a button in the right place, and then it would communicate with something that's installed on the server, whether that's a Flask endpoint or an interview. I mean, it sounds like it could just be a DocAssemble interview. And we can.
My first suggestion was going to be a DocAssemble interview, and like the suggested workflow would be have your source open in one tab, like you're editing in the like playground, you're editing the not the source, the dot features file. In the playground, you have another tab open that's to the interview, and then that's to this special kiln interview, and then like you could select you would have to select I'm running this playground and I want to run this feature file, and then have an optional like do you want to run any specific tags, and then click go and it would run. And then we would have a reset button that would reread everything and like make sure it's using the latest up-to-date stuff. So it would run, it would show all the details. You could switch to your other tab, change your test, change your interview or whatever, go back to the original thing, click reset or click rerun, and then it would redo the whole thing with the fresh inputs. That was how I pictured the workflow, and that's I really would like it for it to be in DocAssemble because I think that's much better of a UX. But I sort of agree it's not likely to get Jonathan's not likely to like accept it if it's just kiln specific, and it's a very complicated thing to make generic. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess where we basically could it be like a plugin system? I mean, like some hooks for changing certain screens.
yeah, like there's like the thing for the snippets. We would just have to make that for like, oh, if you're looking at this kind of file in your sources or like any other in your static thing, we would just be able to add some extra buttons. Is how I was thinking it, because I think the most useful thing would be here's the feature file you're already editing it. Click the run button, and it would run the tests right then and there, and it would know what playground you're in, and it would know what feature file you're trying to run.
That's what
already.
I was thinking. It would need to open up a terminal display of the terminal window, but you know, or some results somehow could open.
The results I'm thinking would be still would probably be viewed the same. Like do a new tab, and then it would like have the DocAssemble background. It would be running in a background process anyway, and so it would just have a background process and maybe show like it's completed this many tests, and when it finishes all of them, we'd show the whole terminal text, and we'd show all the screenshots that it took and everything else like that.
Okay. All the terminal text.
The only
I mean,
reason
there would
to
have
like
to be.
go ahead.
It would open a new window. You're saying?
Yes, yeah, it opened a new window, and so that part of the like interview would still need to be a DocAssemble interview running kiln, but it's just a matter of where you press the button to start it. And so the easiest thing to do is just make it a completely separate interview with like select your playground, select your feature file. But I think the best thing would be to get Jonathan to make like a plugin system. So if you're looking at files in the playground, it adds your own button with like a URL or some Python code in an interview to execute. But that feels fairly complicated and also fairly not opinionated, but we'd have some work to do to convince Jonathan that like this is a good thing to add, and that other people would use it besides us. So
Okay.
I think for now, focusing on getting
I mean, it could be like insert your own testing framework button here.
That seems too
Instead of-
specific for a plugin system. Like then we just might as well just have it be our button.
I don't think
that's
it's
what we
a
add.
testing framework, but any like code any Python code that you might want to run on a particular file. It could be a linter, or it could be like it could be MyPy. Like you could do anything really, and it could run on the server, and there's nothing stopping that. It's a good thing to have, but it's just a lot harder. And I think we should focus on the Kiln specific interview first. And if we get that in, then we could do some internal hacking to see, like, get a prototype and see what it looks like. And if we like that, then we could start working on a more generic framework for adding those to DocAssemble.
Because there were some other things we thought of, right? Like the linter was the other big thing, I guess.
Linter's
You already mentioned it out loud. Yeah, Bud to let you tell me what's wrong with this interview. You could run before the interview without having to do it interactively would be nice. Some of those other things we could do on screen. So that actually wouldn't be too hard if they are using the assembly line framework to have a button that is in debug mode, only says debug this interview and let people choose from a list of feature files, right? Like that could be an on-screen element we add with no changes to DocAssemble's core.
That is one place to add it. Is in the, it would be, but that would have to be in the running interview itself.
Yep, would have to be in the running
interview. My vision for the workflows, people are mostly going to be writing the testing code. Like that's where they'll spend most of their time. Actually trying to run the test is from the testing code. And so that's why I wasn't sure if having it in a running interview would be as useful.
I agree. It's not.
It could be though. Like
it's more awkward interface too.
Yeah.
Because you're already running it. Like you've already gotten through screen one. You've done that test manually. Then switching to another test, which might have a different entry point. It might not even be screen one where it wants to start really, right? So like pass a parameter somehow. Okay.
Pass a parameter of what screen to start on?
It could pass a parameter that changes the starting screen. Anyway, right? Like, I'm not saying that's something that has to be accommodated.
Yeah.
It's just saying it's a reason why this might not work. A limitation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, perfect. That's the captures my thought. And not that it's like a super important thought, but it still seems like it's worth building the standalone interview as the best thing. It's the simplest thing. Only thought is like Flask endpoint. Sometimes I build an interview as an interview and I'm like just constantly fighting with the way DocAssemble does stuff, linear workflow. And I'd rather just write my own HTML. So that's what you can do with a Flask endpoint. So that's worth considering.
Okay.
If you end up fighting DocAssemble, it's just a regular web page that you can control all the content of that's built with Python. And the templating language, it uses the templating language. Have you done that with Node web pages before? Or is there, I don't actually know what's the template language that's commonly used with Node? Is there one?
I mean,
there
used
React
to
doesn't
be
have
Pug and
templating, does it?
stuff, but React isn't a templating language.
Right. I guess there is a
was
templating
Jekyll.
system in it.
There's Jekyll and there's Pug.
So in Flask, you use Jinja too as the template language for mix in variable names with the HTML. Have conditional blocks of HTML. It's all done in Jinja.
Okay. And we'd probably do it.
I would only go there. It's not actually that bad to learn. That's how we started building our Rate My PDF website, uses that system.
Okay.
So I can share what I learned, but it's a new thing to learn. I would only say it's worth doing if you're like, I'm just fighting DocAssemble all the time and I'm wasting all my time trying to do things a different way than DocAssemble expects you to do it. Because the reason why that's worth considering is you can have a Flask endpoint live alongside DocAssemble with just one extra line of code, essentially, and a few decorators you need to put on some of your functions. And then once you've done that, it's easy to maintain alongside DocAssemble interviews normally, but it can still use a broader vocabulary and do more things that are a little bit more customized look and feel and way that they work that might make more sense to you.
Okay.
Not super important, but just an idea.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require hacking DocAssembly.
Yeah, which is nice. Okay. So some good ideas, not all of which I understand, but I'm gonna rewatch this later and like if you see something on here that like I didn't capture correctly or didn't manage to capture, that'd be great.
I'll just link to that package so you can see how we do it in DocAssemble PDF stats.
Okay.
And because there was like one thing, like if you're looking at general Flask documentation.
Disassemble or DocAssemble PDF stats? You had dis.
Oh, I must have automatically corrected it.
Doc, okay.
It's not actually a DocAssemble interview anymore. Or I guess maybe it is. So,
It's still called DocAssemble PDF stats.
yep.
So
Okay.
We should maybe rename it to just Rate My PDF and
Probably.
take out the DocAssemble stuff. I never rename packages after I come up with a brand name, though. I keep the original name usually.
yeah.
Doing business hours, right? Okay. I think these are some good starting ideas. And you said a separate interview was probably the fastest, easiest way to start.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I might get a chance to look into that in the coming weeks. We will see. I mean, if I ever finish the date, but it's so almost done. I know that. I just had 3 weeks, so like I'm just still living in that.
Yeah, no, it feels like it's basically done. I mean, just like renaming some parameters.
Yeah, we're trying to. And
if it doesn't work, renaming them another way. So it should be, should be a good flow chart there to get you to the end.
Yeah, and the required thing, and that should be good. Yep, I have definite actionable stuff. Okay, I'm sorry we're over time.
No, that's okay. I just thought of something else, which is the MA Courts stuff. I'll meet with Jessica. She'll be at today, but yeah.
MA Courts.
There are a couple things. Like one is, as I've been working on this up to code project, someone reminded me that we have to check the courts to make sure they're up to date, and they're not. There's some courts that have moved. Unsurprisingly, that happens.
I saw some of those being updated, right? Oh no, those were issues being made.
I just made an issue on it a few days ago.
I thought there
and
were
Bryce, you had
several.
caught one that was missing too. But we had some stuff a while ago. Do you remember, Michelle? We had like a way to kind of compare what we had in a spreadsheet to what was on.
Yeah, I don't
There's
remember
code in
what that
MA
is.
Courts that's just commented out. I have never tried running it,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it still works, but I assumed it was the code y'all initially used to scrape things.
That's what I used to scrape things originally, and it had so many manual updates because there were so many problems in that data. Like I will not run that again to update the list of courts because it's just more likely to introduce errors than to solve issues.
Okay, gotcha.
I can try and find that. I made some kind of scraper.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was in JavaScript or if it was in DocAssemble. And it might have been before my computer broke down and could never be retrieved. So it might be gone.
And if I'm working on the Git command line and someone has a fork and a pull request on my repo, is there a way for me to pull their code locally, change it, and then push it back up to be part of the pull request? That's what I wanted to do with Jessica's pull requests. And I was like, I know I can do that. Making individual suggestions one by one in GitHub.
You can make a pull request. I mean, you can pull from a pull request. I don't remember exactly how, but are you saying to pull from their repo?
I would want to pull from their proposed change. Just use that word.
Okay, you can pull from a pull request. There's GitHub docs on it.
Yeah, so the general thing is you would add their fork as a remote, which I think is like git remote add, and then you would say like
and the
Jessica.
name, and then the name that you
So-
want, and then the wherever the Git address.
The URL. So it'd be like Jessica and then https:// their whole
Unless you're using-
repo fork name. You would
unless you're
then
using SSH.
you're not going to be able to SSH into theirs.
I won't have permission for theirs.
Oh,
You might HTTPS.
SSH isn't about them; it's about you.
It is about you.
You're right. Maybe I could.
Yeah. So
SSH
either
and just-
whatever
yeah.
one, whichever one you
Okay.
use. Yeah. So it's a good point. But then to just check out, you would just do like git checkout that like Jessica / the branch name that she made, and it should pull all, like get all of her changes into your local Git repo. I think there's like a
Unless
check.
they conflict. But
When I push, where would I be pushing? I'd be
Not
pushing to
checkout.
her
you can push
If
to
you-
whatever.
commitment. Well, I want to. I want it to be part of the pull request. Basically, I want to keep that semantic part.
So I was going to say, if I think there's a thing that you have to do, and I don't remember if it's on the owner's side or the user's side, but I think there is a thing that says like let the owner make changes to this PR.
Maintainer.
That like let the maintainer, and then I think like GitHub essentially will say, oh, you're the maintainer of this repo. Someone's trying, like, this is a branch that is a PR on that repo. I will let you change it, even though it's not like your repo or like your fork.
But
And
then
so
I
I think-
believe she would have to pull to update her own code. Maybe.
She would have to pull.
I
She's
don't
doing She's doing everything through the GitHub
Okay.
web UI. I'm pretty sure. So
Oh.
She is. Yeah.
yeah, she wouldn't have to pull in that case. And we've been trying to stick to that because it's a bit easier to start off with. So.
Okay.
But it also sounds like you're trying to make these changes just to keep them on the same PR, and then we'll merge them pretty much right away. Because I think most of them were just slight JSON issues and not like things that she needs to do more work on, right?
I mean, I could have her do them, or I probably could just do it faster with like search and replace and like VS Code shortcuts. So I don't mind doing it.
Okay.
But okay, so I check it out. And you're saying the way to push the change back up might require configuration.
Only from her to say allow maintainers to make changes.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find a PR that I have open somewhere.
Allow edits from maintainers.
It feels like, is that the same thing that would let me do it in GitHub? Because that is there. I can commit the change.
Yes.
Okay,
If you
so then
can
maybe
already
the
do
permissions
that,
are
then
set
you
up.
should be able to push.
It's this button right here.
Okay.
So if she has that checked on her
I
screen,
see. It's up.
if she has that checked in her screen, it will let you push changes.
Okay. All right. So once I've checked it out, I can push it because she has an open pull request basically to my repo. That's what lets me do it. I guess
Yes.
it's just about setting the remotes correctly. Okay, that sounds straightforward. I'll give it a try. At least it's something I know I can try. Thanks for going over, guys.
No.
Yeah, and actually, one more thing, which is not a code related thing, really, maybe worth bringing up at our next admin meeting is I'm thinking of taking out all the descriptions from the courts because they're mostly wrong. I have an issue open for that too. Anyway.
That's fair.
But yeah, basically we have to do a little maintenance on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk with you all later.
Here's I'm just gonna link you. real
Oh, you
quick,
found the
the
code?
no, the how to add a remote in case that wasn't clear.
I've added a remote thing whenever
Oh.
I accidentally had the wrong version of repo on the command line. Yeah, it's still helpful. Okay. All right. See you all later this week.